Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing wages and benefits in the nonprofit sector. Today with us, we have Casey Webster and John Muhlenkamp from My HR Extension. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items with everyone. First, if you have any questions during the webinar, Casey and John are going to be asking some questions as well during the webinar. So just type in your answers and your questions into your chat box as you have them. We'll be periodically checking in and we'll answer a bunch of questions also once we complete the formal presentation of the webinar. So if you type in a question and we don't get to it immediately, don't worry, we'll get to you by the end of the webinar. Also, if you have any issues during the webinar, such as it seems like you're not hearing things, slides don't seem to be moving in how they should be, you just need to close down the webinar, click that link that was sent to you and sign back in. Likewise, if you're on the telephone, same deal, call back in and get reconnected, and that'll solve 99% of the problems you are experiencing. So before we get started, I want to introduce our two speakers today. First, we have Casey Webster. Casey is the CEO and founder of My HR Extension. She has over 20 years of experience helping organizations and professionals navigate the complexities of compensation and benefits. Also today with us, we have John Muhlenkamp. John is a human resources specialist with My HR Extension. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Casey and John. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. This is John. I met you all earlier this year at the Heritage meeting on compliance training in September. We today are going to be going over the new wage and benefit laws and what to expect with these upcoming changes. All right, and so last time we spoke at the roller mill, you all were looking like this clip art here. I know everyone was very concerned about these changes that were planned to be rolling out in January, and so I wanted to do this presentation to talk about what those changes are and how they have been flip-flopping around in all of this chaos that has been going on in the last few months with these changes. So just as a bit of a review, the Fair Standard Labor Act requires employers to classify roles as either exempt or non-exempt. And the terms you've likely heard for these classifications are salary versus hourly employees. So just to make it a little bit easier on yourself, that's a great way to think about it. Employers complete a duties test to determine if a role is exempt or non-exempt. And some of these questions that you could ask yourself to help to determine what classification these roles would fall under is, can this person make a significant decision that will have a financial impact on the company? And does this person have a technical high-end degree? So if either of these questions are answered yes, it's likely that this employee would be considered exempt, rather than non-exempt. Another great way to look at it is classifying this based on their compensation. So initially, effective July 1st, 2024, the threshold for an exempt classification actually increased to $844 per week, equivalent to the salary of $43,888. The last time we spoke, effective January 1st, 2025, this threshold was set to increase again to $1,128 per week, equivalent to an annual salary of $58,656. However, Judge Sean Jordan of the United States District Court in Texas ruled that the Department of Labor exceeded its rulemaking authority, and the ruling vacated the 2024 rule, returning the FLSA salary basis to pre-2024 levels. So not only was this planned January 1st increase canceled, but the increase that went into effect in the beginning of July of this past year was actually rolled back. And this has caused a lot of chaos and turmoil in organizations that were following these recommended increases and intending to increase again in January, as they've now increased the salary of these employees, and this decision has been rolled back. And so a lot of people have been asking Casey and I, when we consult with them, how do I handle this as a manager or as the head of an organization who has now given these raises that are no longer necessary? Do I roll these back? How do I manage this? And Casey and I have talked about it a lot, and we feel that it is not within your best interest to roll back these wage changes. Employees are already feeling a bit of a squeeze in today's times, and rolling back these changes can be seen as employers being ungrateful or not really appreciating their employees. And we want to make sure we're maintaining our top talent and our strong employee and workforce. So rolling back these changes could be seen as disrespectful by a lot of employees, and we want to make sure that we're communicating how much our employees mean to us. And so we recommend that you maintain these changes that you may have put into effect regarding these July 1st increases.
Yeah,
So
so I think right now everyone can take a deep breath. It went away. I know this was a big panic for many nonprofits, many small businesses of how in the world are we going to afford these new thresholds. And I think what's important to know, walking away from this is that awareness that there are thresholds. So even though we don't have this big one coming at us anymore, there is still a threshold that we need to make sure that we are paying at, and then being able to continue to be aware as every year, typically around the fall is when we'll hear like, is it going to go up or not? Historically is when we've seen it. So feel free to like continue to watch, but I think having that awareness, so the next time that something like this is mentioned, you're like, okay, yep, I know what they're talking about. And then how do we combat this? So, but big round of applause and excitement that we don't have to cross that battle of how are we going to come up with this money right at this point.
all right. So next, we want to move into a little bit of an activity to help work on the skills we kind of just talked about with classifying exempt versus non-exempt employees. So we're going to be looking at a few job descriptions as well as some basic responsibilities of their roles and their qualifications and education background. And we're going to be trying to classify exempt versus non-exempt. And so you can all just think about this on your own as we go. And then at the end of each one, we'll talk about why it is exempt or non-exempt and try to give you some better understanding when trying to do this yourselves. So the first one we have here is a strategic advisor, part-time exec role. They serve as a trusted advisor to the executive team, providing strategic insights and supporting high-level decision-making. Their responsibilities include advising on organizational strategy and direction, contributing to both strategic initiatives and administrative tasks, and collaborating with leaders on long-term planning and organizational impact. Qualifications are likely something to the extent of being extensively experienced in strategic planning and organizational leadership, and having strong analytical and decision-making skills. So in the chat, if you want to go ahead and put exempt or non-exempt, what you think this role would be classified as. And I'll give you all about 10 to 15 seconds to do that.
And so exempt means that they are exempt from overtime and that they are salary. And non-exempt means they're an hourly employee and they are eligible for overtime.
I'm starting to see some things roll in the chat. So I'll go ahead and say that this role would be exempt from overtime. The key things to look at here to determine that would be that this role is advising on organizational strategy and direction. And that is a key aspect of an employee being classified as exempt. Like we talked about on one of the previous slides, if this person within your organization has strong say in the organizational direction and making strong financial decisions on behalf of the company, this role would likely be exempt because this person is very high in your organization. Another thing to look at is that this person has a background in organizational leadership. So again, making these high-level decisions within companies and organizations like yours, this role would likely be exempt in almost all cases. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our grants and partnership specialist. So this role utilizes advanced knowledge in nonprofit management to drive funding efforts, collaborating with grant partners, and overseeing project-specific budgets. Their responsibilities likely include coordinating with partners to secure funding and meet project milestones, managing budget allocation and reporting for grants, and contributing to grant writing and developmental strategies. The qualifications are that this person holds a master's degree in nonprofit management or a related field, and that they have proven experience in budgeting and partnership management. So once again, we'll ask, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, whether this role would be exempt, a salary position they're exempt from overtime, or non-exempt. They are an hourly employee who is not exempt from receiving overtime. All right, so this role would also be exempt. And the key things to look at here are that, once again, this role is managing budget allocation and reporting for grants. Having a strong say in financial decisions within the company likely means a role is always going to be exempt. And another thing that we're going to look at here in the qualifications is that this degree really strongly emphasizes the preference for a master's degree in nonprofit management or a related field. And again, going back to a couple slides ago, we talked about some questions to ask yourself to help you determine exempt versus non-exempt status. One of those was maintaining and holding a high-end technical degree in a field. So something like nonprofit management would be absolutely a high-end technical degree, and especially a master's. So when thinking about whether a role is exempt or non-exempt, that is a great way to kind of ask yourself a quick question and come to the answer. So we got one more here, I believe. Or two more, I apologize. So this is going to be our event planner. They organize and execute events that reflect our mission and engage our community, overseeing a team to bring each event to life. The responsibilities include planning, coordinating, and managing organized hosted events, negotiate with vendors and manage event budgets, and lead a team of assistants and volunteers for smooth event execution. Their qualifications include experience in event planning, vendor relations, and budget management, and they have demonstrated leadership skills and the ability to work under deadlines. So this one's a little bit trickier. I'm going to ask again, is this role exempt or non-exempt? Okay, starting to see the answers roll in here. So this role would actually be also considered exempt. And one big way you can kind of determine this again is that this event planner is managing the budgets for the event, and they're also leading the team of assistants and volunteers. And so in a role like this, that is not always the case, especially when managing things like the budget of the event. But in this specific role as an event planner, because they are managing the budget of events and leading assistants and volunteers, this role would almost always be considered exempt. All right, so we have one more here. It's going to be our social media coordinator. This role manages the organization's digital presence and engages with community stakeholders through innovative and authentic social media content. Their responsibilities include creating and posting social media across all platforms, tracking engagement and analyzing performance metrics, and engaging directly with followers to strengthen brand awareness and community presence. Their qualifications likely include strong understanding of social media platforms and digital trends, and the ability to work independently with minimal supervision. So as our last one here, would this role, in your opinion, fall under the exempt status, a salary role, or a non-exempt status, an hourly role? Okay. So this role would actually be considered non-exempt. One big way to determine that is, they are not in a management or leadership position. And this role also does not require any technical or high-end degree. So we're not seeing this person, having to get their master's or anything like that. And so for roles like this, where they are not overseeing budgeting or making strong decisions on behalf of the company, they're not in charge of employees, and they're also not holding a technical high-end degree, we're going to see roles like this almost always considered non-exempt. So that's our last one for this little activity. And now we're going to move to market research and benchmarking, and I'm going to have Casey take over on this slide.
Yeah, so when it comes to figuring out how much should I pay this employee, market research is going to be your best friend in benchmarking. And my advice when you go out and you do this is to work really hard to find really reliable data. So if you look at my screen right now, you're going to see this is a data that came out of a system. It's a paid system called Comp Analyst, where they are pulling information from all over the place to come up with these numbers. And you can see in this report specifically, we've got an administrative assistant and we've got an event planner. And when we look at this data, we can see in the middle of the screen, you'll see like number of ORGS. So how many organizations in the Dayton area have this role? And then how many people are actually in this role is what the number sign INCS stands for. So what I wanted to demonstrate, if you look at the administrative assistant, this is really good data. We have 650 companies with over about 10,000 employees in this type of role in the Dayton area. So when I come over and I look to see what do these people make, this is pretty good data that I would feel pretty comfortable putting in front of somebody. But when I come down and I look at this event planner role, I can see that there wasn't even enough people in those roles for it to put numbers here on how many organizations and how many employees. So they are estimating these numbers based off of a lot of factors. Still pretty good information, but I'd like to see data that has more strength behind it or more numbers behind of how they actually came up with that information. And so and why I wanted to show you this is because I see so many times, and I've had employees come to me throughout my career, and they go on Google and they say, how much should a administrative assistant in Dayton, Ohio make? And, something will pop up. And a lot of times that's just self-reported information where like 3 to 5 people put out online how much money they make. And then now that's what everyone should make in that position is like that perception. And so you want to make sure you're always getting really reliable data on how much should you be paying. A lot of times your chambers will do local compensation studies. You can go to the state website and look at information under the Department of Labor of different stats of what jobs are paying. But the other thing that I want to mention is we got to be really careful about job titles too, because we talked earlier about that event planner role, right? And it was like, well, at one company it might be exempt, but at another company it might be non-exempt because we might have the same title, but they might have different responsibilities. Which also might mean they pay 2 completely different things. We might have an event planner at one city main street making $50,000 and another one at another city making $25,000. But they have the same job title, but maybe they're responsible for completely different things. So when you're doing your market research, really dig in not just to what the job title says, but it will actually tell you what does somebody in this role do that's making this kind of money. And that's going to help you connect the dots to say, you know what? We title ours an event planner, but they're really an event manager. And so do your research when you're figuring out how much you should be paying and make sure you're using reliable data.
Thank you, Casey. So now we're going to move into employee compensation and benefits. And, kind of like we talked about at the beginning here, I know everyone was very concerned about these upcoming or proposed upcoming changes to FLSA standards. And, as a nonprofit, it's hard to compete with these large salaries and top of the line health insurance that larger companies are able to provide and pay for very easily. And so, small organizations like Heritage, we need to get creative about how we fund compensation and what we offer in terms of benefits. So I think before we get into our recommendations and some teachings, I thought that this would be a good moment to do a little bit of brainstorming here. So what I would like is for you all to put in the chat, how many of you today have a bonus plan structured? Whether that be you have structured a bonus plan for your employees or a bonus plan has been structured for your particular role. I'm just curious what that looks like at Heritage currently. So go ahead and put in the chat how bonus plans are structured at Heritage at the moment. And Devin, if you could read me any of the feedback we're getting here as it comes in, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. All right. First one here says our event coordinator can earn a bonus if they raise more donations and vendor fees than the previous year. Another one here says we are currently working on putting a bonus structure in place. I'm interested to hear more about what others have to say on how they structured theirs. And just kind of going off to some of my memories of looking at past salary surveys, it's a lot of performance-based metrics of, meeting goals for the year. There's another one here says we have a bonus max written into our employee contracts. We define each year the way in which the bonus can be earned, spell out with specific percentages and goals met.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So it seems like Heritage actually has some great initiatives in place to sort of incentivize and drive employees to really reach above and beyond. And I think those are really great methods for forming bonus plans. So some of what we have here is additional sponsorship revenue going towards bonuses, social media engagement goals. Maybe the social media coordinator, if they reach 200 comments across the posts leading up the month before an event and drive engagement up for these event posts very, very high, they're able to receive some amount of a bonus. Maybe that's $50 for every 200 comments, or however it's structured. Something like advertising return on investment could also be really great. So for every $1,000 earned over the budget, $50 go back towards the advertising department. I think someone said that something similar is set up at Heritage at the moment, so that's really great. And another thing is event profitability, which also seems like you guys have some incentives in place there. If an event makes $1,000 over the budget, the same kind of thing could happen where $50, $100 goes back towards the people who are in charge of organizing it and raising that money. And these are great ways to incentivize, our employees to really drive towards those goals and push past them, setting higher ones each year. And, building out these bonus plans this way, obviously Heritage can't pay for this out of pocket. So it's a great way for, not only Heritage to make more and more money, but also be able to give some of it back to their employees. And, even $50, $100 off of that $1,000 extra earned, that's nothing to Heritage, but that's everything to your employees. And so keeping those high, earning employees and keeping those employees who are really striving above these goals each and every year, these are great metrics to track and to incentivize people to push. So now what about benefits? And, kind of in the same way that I'm sure Heritage and other small organizations like Heritage can struggle with directly competing with compensation when it comes to these large organizations, things like benefits are the same way, where as small nonprofits, we are really going to struggle to offer a cafeteria and a home gym and all of these things like a massive company like Google might be able to offer their employees. And so, when it comes to hiring the best and the brightest talent at Heritage, we need to get a little bit creative with how we are structuring our benefits plans and ways in which we can incentivize employees to really, be more comfortable and find a home at Heritage and be happy with the benefits that they're able to get there that they may not be able to get at a for-profit company or a very large company. It's not all about how much money you're able to spend on the benefits. Benefits can be, a wide range of things. And so I want to ask a question again in the chat. What can Heritage offer in terms of unique benefits? So as a small organization like Heritage, what can we offer people that maybe is unique? Maybe it's different. Maybe a donor is owns a restaurant in town, and we're able to do a fundraising goal for our employees. And if the highest raising fundraiser gets a all-inclusive meal at that dining area with their entire family. These are things that we can get creative and we can sort of incentivize our employees to, push above and beyond. So Devin, if you could read some of the chat answers here. What can Heritage offer in terms of unique benefits?
All right, just waiting for a couple to come in. We did have a comment from an organization that we partner with. So they don't offer benefits currently, and that's stated from the start when employees start. So no holidays, no insurance, and no sick pay.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. Like I was talking about with these small organizations, it's hard to be able to offer those things and find the money to have those things covered. So I totally understand.
And this one is more aimed at us from an organization we partner with. They'd like to see Heritage Ohio offer a marketplace for Main Street directors to buy into for healthcare. It's something we've definitely investigated in the past. Currently, this organization is buying theirs through the Chamber of Commerce marketplace for employees, so the SOCA plans.
Okay.
And I'm not seeing any more for the moment, so if you just want to continue. Oh, we got one more. I lied. At best, we offer leftovers from events, leftover chocolate, leftover cookies from ticketed events, but nothing one can count on or take to the bank for that organization.
Okay, yeah, totally. And again, like I said, with all of these, it's totally understandable. It's hard for small companies like Heritage, nonprofits to really leverage these kind of benefits when the money is so tight. So I think it's important to get a bit creative with what is a benefit and how we could sort of accommodate people's needs. And that could be a wide range of things. Something like flexible work arrangements, compressing a work week for maybe an employee who stepped into the nonprofit sector at Heritage because they are starting a family and they are struggling with the amount of hours that they would need to give to a large organization. If we could give them a 4-day work week, we're really able to leverage how smart and strong this employee is. And that's a benefit that they can't really get at maybe other companies. So thinking about how we can accommodate strong talent that maybe just has some, unordinary needs. Maybe some mentorship programs, taking someone under your wing and offering them the opportunity to get more experience as an organizer at Heritage. Personalized thank you notes to employees, thanking them in very specific detail about the efforts they've made at the company in the past 6 months or the past year, and really trying to drive home how much you appreciate the work that they're doing. I think another great one is experience-based rewards. How can you incentivize people who have maybe a lot of experience in nonprofit organization and management to step into Heritage? You can offer them rewards like I talked about. Maybe you're able to give them a free meal at a downtown restaurant or organization that's willing to help out. Maybe if something like a concert venue is or someone who owns a concert venue is a donor to Heritage, you could talk to them about having one set of free tickets every year that you're able to provide to the employee who earns the most money for an event or who drives the most metrics for registering for an event. You know, how can we really be creative and find alternative uses for great incentives for these people to really strive and go above and beyond. And I think another important factor here to remember is that retention is just as important as something like a prize raffle. You know, getting a reward from a donor or a grant writer and thinking that maybe you'll just raffle that off at the event to go towards a fundraising goal. You know, maybe that's something that 1 year or for a specific reward that you keep and do within employees at the company, and you know, have that be a way you can really get people excited about Heritage and what they can offer their employees. It can take an average of 18 months after director turnover for a nonprofit to really get back on track and get back to where they were. So, you know, retaining your strong talent within the organization is just as important as something like recruiting. And so you can get really behind the 8 ball if you don't make sure that we're retaining this top talent and these strong workers that we have at Heritage and organizations like it. And the next thing I want to talk about here is leveraging donor and grant relationships to fund compensation. So this is a bit of a tricky subject. I know we ask a lot of donors and grant writers already, and you know, sometimes tension can be there when trying to ask for a little bit more. It's not always clear to these people why an organization might need a little bit more money, or you might really have to push them in the right direction to convince them why this is so important. And so I kind of wanted to take this opportunity again to have you all in the chat. What makes you uncomfortable about leveraging donor relationships to fund additional compensation? And as these come in, Devin, if you're able to read them again, I would appreciate
Sure.
that.
I suppose one question I have that I think a lot of organizations would have is just to kind of go a little bit in the same direction as what you're asking too, is what is a good review policy on benefits? So I think a lot of organizations out there, they, you know, look at benefits and they say, oh, you know, we can't afford it right now. But really, you know, then a lot of times, well, we thought about it 10 years ago. And that's where the conversation kind of dies. You know, really, as at the organizational, like executive level and board level, really, what's a good policy for, you know, kind of reviewing benefits and seeing, does it make sense now to include this as a benefit that we offer to our employees?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I would say every year. So that is what a for-profit that does have a benefit program does. You know, if you have a January 1 renewal date, typically around June, July is when we start looking at different options that are out there. Who are the different brokers? What are the different kind of plans that we could offer? And then you're putting those into the budget in the summer. You're getting everything lined up so that you can roll out January 1 is typically what we would do. And I would highly recommend that nonprofits and the boards would take that same practice, you know, about, you know, spring, start investigating what's out there, you know, and then come budget season, we're able to come with a recommendation of, yes, this year we think we can afford it, or nope, we're still not there. We're going to need to raise this much more money. Like, what's the plan to do that over the next couple of years so we can offer benefits? But I would research in the spring. I would make the proposal at budget season. And if the proposal is a no, then you're working on what is that 1, 2, 3, 5-year plan to get us in a condition where we could offer the benefits. And then you're repeating that every year. Are we on track or are we not on track to being able to get there?
Excellent advice. Thanks, Casey. All right, back to John's question to everyone. We have a couple comments here. The first one is from a partner organization. It's less about leveraging the donors and more about finding the qualifying funds. Some funds have specific ties to being project-based or event-based. And another commenter here says, no guarantee in the future of employee salary.
Yeah, so you're right. Like grants typically will not allow you to cover operating salaries. That's why, and I know there's a lot of talks, I've been on several different panels with some of the big grants in the state of Ohio, just talking about that need for covering salaries and that struggle. So I know there is talk there, but this is where I think that you need to leverage your donors. And I would leverage those donors that have ran successful businesses that truly in their heart understand the importance of people. And I would have a conversation with them where it's like, look, this is really tough for me to come and talk to you about, but I really respect you as a business leader, and I want to get your advice on this. And our biggest struggle is salaries, and it's hard to go to donors and ask for money to pay staff because um, it's just something we've never done before, and so it makes it awkward. But at the end of the day, every time we turn somebody over, we're falling back 18 months of getting back, and we're not able to meet our mission. And at the end of the day, our staff stability is what we've decided is the strategic initiative we need to do to really hit our goals at Main Street. And what are your thoughts on how do we get donors to um, donate towards salaries? Like, how do you feel about that? And I would approach them like I just did, like I'm asking them a question for feedback and for them to start talking like, yeah, I get it. I ran a company and we used to, every time we'd lose someone, we couldn't ship and whatever those things were. And then, kind of lead into getting them bought in by just brainstorming of, how do we approach this? And then ultimately asking them like, is this something that you would be willing to dedicate your donation dollars to?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Casey. These donor relationships are really where you can drive this sort of narrative. They know the value of their employees and how important it is to have a strong culture and maintain the top talent. So these people will be the most understanding of, needing to help out with compensating these employees as well as we can. And how do we do this? Highlighting staff achievements to these donors or to these grant writers is a great way to get them to understand the value of your employees and why we need to have competitive salaries as much as possible in order to maintain their status as employees of your company. Including narratives from staff members directly and to highlight their direct role in the success of the company and how their efforts directly led to you raising more money than you ever have for a specific event. It's nice to say that our organization is doing well, our organization achieved this, but when you really put a name and a face to it and say that this person did this for our company and I want to be able to offer them a higher paying wage so that they are incentivized to stick around. I think that you're able to add a human element to it and really make them see that, organizations are really made up of their individuals, and highlighting these achievements from staff members is a great way to really drive that point home. And maybe even beyond giving them narratives, invite the donors to engage with the staff directly. Something like holding a small event where donors have the opportunity to meet these staff members and talk with them about what they've been working on this year, what they've achieved, and maybe even getting into their personal lives and having a bit more of a personal relationship with these donors. Again, it's easy to see an organization as a faceless monolith, but when you put faces out there and you let these people engage with the staff directly and they're able to see how much they contribute to the company as individuals and how they are great people and we want to keep them in our organizations, we can really drive home this narrative with donors by giving them the opportunity to interact with the staff. And, emphasizing the importance of equity and fairness in compensation is a great part of that conversation with these donors. They will understand it just as well as anyone because they have strong business ties and they are likely successful business people within the community. They know just as well as you do that fair pay is absolutely critical in maintaining strong employees.
And John, I got two more comments here that came in. I think that are good to reinforce what you're saying. The first one is that the individual is saying at their organization, they make a point of saying that we couldn't do anything we do, events, business owner trainings, etc., without staff that must be paid. Even overseeing our huge volunteer army needs paid staff. And the second comment here is that the organization says that they like to remind all of their donors and the businesses they interact with on a regular basis that the ROI the organization is providing not only to that business and that individual but also the whole downtown.
Yeah, those are great comments. I agree with them really strongly, and I think here I'm hoping you're seeing how we can go from talking about our organization to talking about our people, and really making this a personal matter, and giving these donors the opportunity to engage with the staff directly, I think is a great way for them to see not only is our whole organization very important and we want to maintain all of our staff, but letting them really meet the staff and getting them to understand that this person did this, and Susie achieved a new fundraising goal for our downtown concert event, and she has been amazing in her role, and we have loved having her here. And this is why Susie is important, and this is why Jeff is important. And getting them to see the individual value of the people rather than emphasizing the importance of all of your employees, it gives them a more of a personal note, and it lets them better understand beyond just the point that I think a lot of people can just sort of nod their head to and then not do anything about. Really adding this personal point to it and getting them the opportunity to meet with these people directly is a great way to drive these points home further. And so what the kind of question I want to ask here too is, based on what we talked about here, what kind of events could Heritage run that would facilitate interaction between donors and employees? How can we start to drive this conversation in this direction and allow these donors to meet our employees and see the individual value each person brings? How are we looking, Devin?
I think some people might be typing, nothing in yet though.
That's all right. It's quite a loaded question, so give some people some time to brainstorm a little bit.
I think people are hoping you have some good ideas for them.
Something I thought about quite a bit when I was doing the research for this presentation is having a small dinner or get together where maybe a donor who owns a restaurant in the area is able to, compensate some food, and inviting your donors and your staff to all come and have dinner, and encourage mingling amongst the donors and the staff, and really give them the opportunity to talk with one another and share their experience, what they're working on within the company and their role. And I think something like a dinner or an outdoor event at something like a park in the local community, these are great ways to encourage donors to come meet with the staff directly, and they get something out of it too, whether that be a small bit of food or maybe some wine, and just encouraging them to come and talk with the staff and really understand the importance that each individual person plays in this company, in your organizations, and why each person really matters, and how we need to be compensating them fairly in order to maintain these tenured staff members, or even to show to people outside the organization how great a place like Heritage really is, and maybe even encourage people who are on the fence about maybe applying or trying to get more involved at Heritage to really step in and take on a big role and help out. Did we get anything, Devin?
Not at the moment.
Okay, that's all right. Well, then I think it's pretty safe. We could just move to the Q&A section. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate everyone sticking around and listening to what we have to say about those crazy changes with the FLSA changes, as well as how we can, as nonprofits, move towards finding ways to get creative about our compensation and benefits and maintain these great employees that we have. So I'll just open up the floor, either in the chat or if you're able to talk within the webinar. Anyone who has any questions, we can go ahead and field some questions and listen to some feedback from people.
Thanks both John and Casey. Yes, so if you have questions, type them into the chat box. And we'll take a short commercial break here, so we'll give you guys a little bit of time. So first off, we'd like to thank My HR Extension for doing this webinar today. It was really wonderful. I also would like to thank the Ohio Department of Development. Their funding makes these webinars possible throughout the year. So upcoming, we have a couple webinars next month that the registration is going to be posted very soon, so keep your eyes open for these. First up, we have the Ohio America 250 webinar. We're going to be discussing some of the events upcoming and how your community can participate in celebrating America's 250th birthday. And also we have a two-part webinar later in the month of January. This one's a little bit different from anything else that we've been doing lately. You might have seen this presentation at our conference, and it was very well attended and received, so we're going to do it again. So with Squay Caldwell, architectural firm, we're going to be talking about the building code basics for Main Street communities to understand about their downtown. All right, so remember to type those questions in. I got one right here. So for organizations that are looking at getting better information about their employees' salary and how it's comparable to others in the field in their region, what are some good resources for them to be looking at?
Sure. So I would start with the Department of Labor's website. For the state of Ohio, you can go get some salary information out on the state website based off of what people are submitting from taxes is how they're gathering that information. You can also reach out to your local chamber. A lot of times, I know here, I live in Miami County, and they have several of the local counties here. The chambers come together and they do a annual survey every year that goes out to all their chamber members. So check with your local chamber to see if they have anything. You can also check with your workforce development in your local area, whether that's through the county or our county in Miami County recently did a comp survey as well and made that available to employers. You can also go out onto the federal website and get some information, but those are going to be looking at it from a larger scale. They don't always break it down based off of region, and we know cost of living is going to be different on the West Coast than it is here in the Midwest. So those are options, and then there's also then paid options out there as well that you could invest into.
Thanks, Casey. So this next question, I think, is a two-parter here. So I'm just going to combine this into one idea and then give it to you in two questions at the end. So a lot of nonprofits are on this webinar, and obviously a nonprofit is they're mission-driven. And I think a lot of times, the mission becomes all-consuming to organizations, and they kind of forget that they have employees a lot of the time. They don't just have volunteers that are so happy to meet the mission, and that's the end of the tale. So what is a good way for both individuals that work in nonprofits to have those conversations with their board members about things like compensation and benefits? And what are some strategies for boards to employ to make that conversation less tense and less uncomfortable for people that are not used to asking for things for themselves because they're working on mission-driven work?
Yeah, and that's, having some clear expectations, roles, and responsibilities is who is responsible for this information, and that's going to be the one every spring to say, hey, we're going to go look to see if we can offer benefits. Is that the executive director bringing recommendations to the board, or is that the board out doing that work on their own, and taking that executive director out of that middle ground role of finding their own benefits, essentially. So I think one, like having that conversation with your board to say, okay, we need to do this on an annual basis. Where does it fit best for us? And I think that might be unique for each one of the individual main streets, depending on how engaged your board is and what type of board members you have, what kind of backgrounds they have. So that all might be a little unique. But I think just when you have those conversations, it's about being humble. It's about asking questions. It's about getting buy-in and getting curious. It's about how can we solve this problem? If you can make it about, the others versus yourself sometimes, you never want to go in and be like, well, I know this nonprofit's paying this, and I know this nonprofit's paying this, where it makes it sound like you're just coming in and being like, well, that's what I should make too. It's like, well, my first step would be, how do we want to get this data? Do you want me to go out and find some pay data on some other executive directors and present that back to you? So just having some really clear guidance on how are we going to approach this would be the first step. And then again, when you're talking to those donors, it's just being really humble to say, look, here's the pickle we're in. Like, grants don't support, covering salaries. And that's our biggest gap with the nonprofit. At the end of the day, these people they're here for the mission, but they do have to put food on the table. And every time we lose somebody, it takes us 18 months to get right back. And so we're just wasting donor dollars in our turnover. And so we need to figure out how we can pay our staff more so we're more competitive, so we don't lose them, so that we can better utilize the money that's being donated to us.
Yeah.
So a bunch of random ideas there.
Yeah, and something I want to tag on to what the end of Casey said there is going back to something we talked about in a couple slides ago. We talked about how losing something like a head of a department can take 18 months for a small organization like this to really get back on track and be on top of their responsibilities again. And so that's another thing to really emphasize is not only do we need to compensate these people because we want to make sure we're maintaining this talent, but emphasizing that by not maintaining the talent, you're also setting the organization back potentially even an entire year where you're trying to recruit the right person for this role. And that can be a very difficult process. So emphasizing that not only do we want this person here because they're great, but also replacing them is very, very costly and will take a lot of time. And during that time, their responsibilities may go without anyone really to take them on, or put unneeded pressure on someone else in an adjacent role.
Thanks, Casey and John. So one other question here, kind of going off of, what we were talking about earlier, what are some strategies for boards? I mean, obviously there's the normal stuff like healthcare and things like that, but if they're looking at really, creating a competitive benefits package, really, what are some strategies they should be employing to create those competitive packages?
Yeah. So one big thing that I would say is to sort of get creative and be more willing to offer things that may be harder for a traditional company to offer. Something I talked about on the slide where we really went over that is, maybe something like a compressed work week, or an option where employees are able to work from home a couple days of the week. Especially as a lot of these larger companies are moving away from this model. People working in the nonprofit industry may have extra incentives that require them to work from home, like having small children, or having very busy schedules. And so by being able to offer something like a compressed work week or a remote work, you're offering something that these traditional companies are not really offering at the moment, and you're really being competitive in ways that these companies are not doing. And so by doing that, you're able to compete without necessarily offering more money, or the top tier health insurance, or constant paid sick leave all the time. By offering these competitive opportunities for employees that these larger companies aren't, you can really sort of find niches that you're able to fill. Another great thing that you could do is, like I kind of mentioned, let's say as an example, the Rose Bowl Pavilion, or Rose Pavilion, is one of the donors for one of the organizations, and they provide concert tickets every year that you raffle off at one of your events as a way to raise money for that event. I think a great way to sort of, spin that towards a benefit is to raffle it off within the organization, and really encourage, great participation among your employees, and you're able to offer something that might not be what is offered at a traditional large company, but Heritage is able to leverage its unique position as a nonprofit in this area with local connections to other business owners and small businesses, and really, drive home the unique opportunity that you have by working at Heritage in the relationships that you have with other companies.
Sounds great. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, so if you got a final question to ask, you got about 1 minute to do it. So I'd just like to once again thank my HR Extension and Casey and John for doing this webinar today. Wonderful information, and I'm sure people may have some questions, so you might get a couple more emails coming up in the future from these individuals that they want to ask more personally. But thanks again for doing this today. It was wonderful, and thanks everyone for attending our webinar. Casey, John, do you have any final comments before we conclude the webinar?
No, not at all. I just want to also kind of echo what you said. Thank you so much to everyone for coming out. We really enjoy doing these talks, and something I really took away from talking to a lot of you at Heritage in our last meetings was how passionate and determined everyone here was to really make a positive change in the community and within the Heritage organization. So I was very excited for this presentation, and I loved hearing all of your questions. Everyone here is always great about participating and wanting to find answers to the problems they're facing. So thank you all so much for coming out and for asking your questions, and we really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you guys once again. Thanks everyone. Have a good day. We'll see you at our next webinar. Thanks.
Thank you.